every presentation for me. These days, I never know what's going on. So even though I'm the one who is giving the presentation about our project, which was on problem-based multimedia case study for learning about forest soils in South Africa, by no means this was not just my own project. This was a team effort, truly a team effort of several of us that you can see us on the screen here, from University of British Columbia in Vancouver, also from Stellenbosch University in Stellenbosch in Western Cape province in South Africa, and also our project coordinator, Khalil Walji, at the time was working for FAO with United Nations. Everybody played a part, and you know, having a project that spans 2 continents really requires a team effort. The goal of our project was to develop a problem-based learning case study that also has an accompanied multimedia. The reason for that combo is to help our students get a better context in which the case was situated, so that they can understand the place and site conditions and other socio-economic conditions of the forestry in the region, climate, topography, and other things that are of relevance when one is developing management practices in forestry. And also we were hoping by packaging this PBL case with multimedia content, we were hoping that we will help our students to improve the overall learning, the overall inquiry, understanding about the case or problem that's given to them to work on through that particular case. Before I go into the details of the case, just to give you a context where the case is situated. So a little bit of background about the course for which material or this whole project was aimed for. This is a combination of 4th-year course and a graduate course. It's called Sustainable Soil Management, and it's offered through UBC in Vancouver. And when I was preparing for slides for this presentation, I was going through photos that I have, and I came across this one, which it's a nice photo, shows a nice one of the new classrooms at UBC. But interestingly enough, the group in forefront of this slide, this group here, is actually working on this particular case. Photo was taken in better times when we were offering or when we were teaching and learning in person. And that was February of 2022. So just before the pandemic struck, these guys were given, that was the premiere of this particular case. Anyhow, in this particular course, we are trying to apply basic soil science concepts across a variety of ecosystems. By doing that, we want to illustrate to our students that soil science concepts are truly universal. It really doesn't matter if somebody is located in BC or in Ontario or in Kenya or South Africa or any other part of the world. Soil science concepts cross those ecosystem and also national and continental boundaries. We usually tell that to students, and those of us who are soil scientists actually are excited about that angle of our discipline. But this course really truly gives students opportunity to experience how these concepts cross various boundaries. Another goal that we have for this course is to, through giving them these PBL cases, to simulate what happens in real life when a land manager comes to a site that's new to him or her, and what are the key steps in an assessment that he or she needs to do in order to establish the best or most adequate management practice for that particular ecosystem that they are working on. Course is structured in such way that we have 3 modules, and each of those modules is 4 weeks in length. Each of the modules has its own focus. So one is focused on soil physics, and the other one on soil chemistry, and the third one on soil biology. And as I mentioned, the course is carried through implementation of problem-based learning case studies. In such approach, we are basically, as it's shown at the bottom part of the slide here, we are giving students a specific real-life problem. And then we ask students, what are the key things through various guiding questions and help that we as tutors provide. We ask them to identify what they need to know, what they need to learn. And then while they're learning, they're also trying to apply that knowledge to solve the problem in the case that they were assigned. If you remember, this course is a 4th year / graduate course. So by this time, students have enough of the background in both soil science and agriculture / forestry or environmental sciences. So it's kind of a testing ground for their knowledge. Can they actually be able to implement that, because that knowledge that they already gained from other courses, because most of them are taking this course in the last year of their studies. So very soon upon graduation, they will be in a position of a real life professional who is going to do assessments like what we are trying to simulate in our course. Lots of information here, but I just wanted to show you these 3 modules and what are students doing through each of those modules, or 4 weeks that comprise each of the modules. There is lots of teamwork that's guided by course instructors. At the end of the work on the module or the case in week 4, they give group presentation for which they obtain a group mark. And then during the following week, they're writing an individual report or term paper on their own individual learning on the case, for which they're receiving an individual mark. And then they repeat that 3 times over the virtue of the term. In the final exam, which is take home, they are given another case study, but much smaller in scope, and that's an individual project for them to carry on by themselves. In this course, and there is even more information on this table, but I just want to make 2 points. In this course, we have a variety of PBL cases, 15 in total, that we rotate. Students are allowed to choose or tell us their preference on which case during each of the modules they would like to work on. And we try to give them their top selection. Out of those 15 cases that we have in the course, we have 8 that are labeled here by these red arrows that are contributed by our colleagues who are not course instructors. We call them guest case contributors. That opens up the variety of examples that goes way beyond what I can offer them and my co-instructor can offer them through our own background and research. So we offer students much broader context and examples than 2 instructors can do based on their own experience. And highlighted in green is the case study from South Africa, so it kind of fits between the soil chemistry module in the course. Such a huge variety of cases might raise a question, and I know raises a question in minds of our students at the beginning of the course: how is this all going to work when things are so different? Well, there are some, we try to organize them or structure these cases in the same way, and each of the cases has to have the following 3 components. Each of them has to start by identifying the key soil properties that are of relevance for a management that case is focused on. Then students need to interpret management impacts on those key soil properties. And then finally, they have to synthesize their findings both in oral format and give those group presentations, and also in a written format through a term paper with a very limited word maximum that we give them, so that they are used to writing in a concise and very clear way, as opposed to giving us lengthy explanation that in most cases doesn't mean much. Okay, so that's where the case is situated and in the course and how we implemented it. But what about what our project and what really we developed through this project? In other words, what are the key components that this project had? I put them in order, kind of how we worked on them, but keep in mind that there were quite a few overlaps between the steps that I'm going to show you. One of the first steps that we had to do was to identify an existing study that will be the base for our case. And I'll go over each of these components a little bit more in detail, but let me list them first. Then we have to gather what we thought is relevant background information on the site, and that includes not just soil, but other geographical features, and also a little bit about forestry in South Africa and how does that differ from forestry in BC. Then we had to gather videos and all kinds of photographs and drone images on the location in South Africa. Then editing of that material had to be done. Then the case that will fit between the course needed to be developed. And last but not least, we packaged all of this on the website. So the website needed to be developed in a meaningful way so that students can navigate that in an efficient way. So as I said, the very first step that we had to come up with, even though it took us quite a while, and maybe we started even some other things, was to agree on the study that will serve as a base for our case study that we will implement in the course. And after some discussion, we ended up agreeing that the study that was originating from this particular location, from the long-term experiment on this location, will be the source of data that we will give to the students. Then, kind of in complement, which study are we going to use? We had to discuss and then agree on what is the relevant information about the site. As I said, soil, of course, but not just soil, climate, type of the forest, type of the plantation forest plantation that's being introduced on the site, the study treatments, topography, and many other features that figure in assessment of a site that a professional does when he or she goes on a particular site that's new to him or her. Then a team went to the site together with local videography company, and they collected videos of relevant features on the site, and also drone images and regular photographs. There was lots of material and a couple of attempts to gather that information. And then all that material then has been sent back to UBC Studios, where editing of all of that multimedia material happened. And this step took a long time. Nowadays that we all have phones and we can all take videos, and we all take videos, people might think, well, why go through such a length and employ the professional editing team and professional videography team when people on the ground could just go and videotape that by their phones? True, they could, but then the quality of that material would not be at the level that we ended up having, and also additional insertations of stuff like this. This is just a photograph, but you can insert all kinds of explanations and clarifications in videos and still imagery when you have a professional team, and it can look way easier or way better, and it's much easier for understanding of the material that you are giving to your students. At some point, when we kind of sorted these other things, we had to develop the case itself. What are the key components? What will go into each of the 4 weeks? What are going to be the key guiding questions and tasks that students have to handle during each of the weeks? Because those are all the components that help students go through relatively complex case as a group, so that they are not lost in the complexity of the material that that's being given to them. And this photo here shows a group of students who is looking at handout for one of the weeks, and they are discussing tasks that they have to address during that case that they are working on. And then, as I mentioned, the last stage, when we had all the material and everything in place, then we had to organize that in such a way so that it's accessible to students, that's accessible to them all the time, that doesn't require any password or anything. So we put together this website where all the material of relevance for the case is presented, and the URL for the case is shown over here. So what have we learned in such a complex project? Well, first of all, plan ahead. Any multi team member project obviously needs planning, but when you have a project that spans across 2 continents, planning becomes even more important. Selection of the right team members, that you have everybody who can address all the key components of the project, is also relevant. But also select people with whom you like to work with and that are keen to communicate with each other, because communication is absolutely the key, especially, you know, in a project where different team members are present at different locations. So it's not just that they have different tasks, but they're not present at the same place, which again emphasizes the importance of the communication. Also be careful what tools, meaning multimedia, you are choosing. There is so much out there. There are so much cool things that are out there, but not necessarily everything that exists and that is available to you and that your team members are capable of implementing is necessarily well aligned with learning objectives of your project, or in our case, this PBL study case. So be careful in that selection that you don't go overboard and include all kinds of bells and whistles, because that can take away from the clarity of what you are trying to communicate to your students. And finally, play or be innovative, be flexible to change your ideas as project goes, because what might have been your starting idea when you didn't have the full comprehension of the material and what could be included in the case might not be the best approach, and be aware that things, you know, certain other things you might learn or certain things might go astray. So be flexible and try to implement and innovate by bringing additional ideas. So with that, that's all I had. I do want to acknowledge the funding that we got from UBC's Teaching and Learning Enhancement Fund for this project. Then also additional help from staff from UBC Studios and also from UBC's Learning Center in Faculty of Land and Food Systems. And finally, students in this sustainable soil management course that are really the true inspiration for projects like this, where we can bring them new and exciting material that goes beyond boundaries of our universities. So with that, thank you for listening, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. And I know that there are some team members here. There are actually quite a few of them. So even if you have technical questions, go ahead, because we have a couple of technical experts and also content experts on the call.
Thank you very much. We've got about 5 minutes for questions, so please, I hope somebody has one. We've got one from Andre Lasselle. Andre, you want to go?
Yeah, actually, I respect a lot the perspective that you basically brought forth, which is, why use something you could do with a cell phone when you can basically use professional material, but not seeing the multimedia project itself raises the question, because you spoke about editing. I guess my first question would be, is there a lot of video teaching material into your multimedia conception that you did for this project?
Oh, thank you for that question. Yes, there is. There are actually 14 individual video clips that describe different components of the case that students have to work on. So there is quite a bit of material and editing and making it, because anybody can just take videos, and maybe some of us who are a little bit more advanced, maybe they can insert some of the descriptions or definitions into those videos, but not everybody can. What also folks from UBC Studios brought on, and also from, I didn't mention Center for Teaching and Learning at UBC as well. Sorry, Chris. We also had education expert. So we, in discussion with team members, I had an idea what I need in my course, but I'm not a multimedia expert myself. So in discussing the composition of the multimedia with those who do have that kind of expertise, I get a better idea how some component of student learning can be presented in multimedia in a different way, better way than I originally had as just my own idea. So I don't know, does that answer your question fully, but please.
Yeah, it answers my question. It actually opens the door for a second one, if I'm allowed, Saul. The second question is basically this. I worked on a lot of projects, and there's always this kind of, I would say, obligation to a certain degree to kind of fulfill all, if possible, the demands of accessibility. Now, in your case, were the 14 videos closed caption? Or sometimes I meet projects where, it's like people need their sight. It cannot be done without sight. And then at that point, it kind of puts back in question, should we close caption all of that? Because obviously the learner wouldn't be able to do the task without having sight. So that was my question about accessibility. Did you actually got to close caption everything? Is it going to be all closed caption? That's pretty much the question.
Yes. The short answer is no. No, we don't have closed caption for these videos. Main reason, not that we were not aware of that, the main reason was project was getting quite long in time. We went over time in terms of how long it took to develop everything. For some other projects, and in this website, soilweb.ca, we have other similar projects for different learning objectives, but whenever we could, we try to add the caption so that those who are visually impaired or those that need different way of accessibility can access the material. It was one way how we had to kind of shorten and say we were done, because even what we put together took way longer than originally planned.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we don't have time for more questions, but there's an interesting comment in the chat I'd like to just refer to. Stacy Alexander suggests that if you have a video transcript, that's better than no closed captions. Yeah. And there's some wonderful services out there, I might add, that will help with the transcription. So Maja, I want to thank you so very much for this wonderful presentation and for the really wonderful project that you shared with us. Now we're going to shift perspectives. to a study about institutional perspectives on faculty development for digital education. I can't think of something that wouldn't be more timely. And we've got a trio of presenters from the two of the three coasts in Canada. Charlene VanLeeuwen, who's the coordinator of teaching and learning at the University of Prince Edward Island. She's taking up the Eastern perspective. Nicole Johnson is the research director at the Canadian Digital Learning Research Association, and she's been involved in EdTech for well over a decade. And then Olga Belikov, who works for the Center for Educational Excellence at Simon Fraser University, and she provides leadership and support to online and blended learning initiatives. And so many of us are very interested in hearing about this study, so I turn it over to the three of you.
There we go. Okay. Charlene, there. I think you're unmuted now, Charlene, too. Did you want to?
Nope, I was just making sure that we're all good, and that everybody can see the slides since I've got the slides.
Perfect. That sounds good. Well, I'll start by introducing myself, and I think we'll each introduce ourselves as we get started. So I'm Nicole Johnson. I was the research director of the CDLRA when this all got started, and I now continue to work for CDLRA, but I've now moved into the executive director role. So what we do as an organization is we originally started with an annual survey that ran, and we collect data from institutions across Canada. So I'll get going with that. Before I get started, I do want to acknowledge that I am presenting today from my home, which is on the shared unceded ancestral territory of both the Matsqui and Sumac First Nations. And certainly this has been timely. This is in the Fraser Valley of British Columbia, and the events of the past couple of months with the floodings in the area have highlighted again the impacts of colonization on the First Nation groups. And I continue to seek to learn more about the lasting impacts of that in my community. And so with that, I think, Charlene, I'll get you to move the slide to the first one here. Okay, so for the CDLRA, and I do have my contact information on the final slide. So if there's any questions specific to what we do in our research, do feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any specific questions. We started in 2019 with an annual survey, or sorry, in 2017, running an annual survey of post-secondary institutions across Canada. And it was a one-year survey. We got a single response from each institution, and it included a mixture of quantitative responses and also open-ended qualitative responses. And so we produced an annual report. Since the onset of the pandemic, we have shifted a bit. We do run, the demand on our services has certainly increased, and we run multiple surveys now per year and different. We've expanded our research efforts, but at the time that we were doing this project, it was a single annual survey, and we, in this study, provide the analysis of open-ended responses from the 2017, 2018, and 2019 national surveys. All right, and next slide. And so the sample for this study is 234 publicly funded post-secondary institutions. Our roster was developed by our board members and with input from leadership across Canada. So we're very confident that our roster represents institutions. There's a few blurred areas where we've got institutions that are part of another, and we've worked with various stakeholders and groups to separate those and identify it. We have the 5 types of institutions in there, which are universities, polytechnics, community colleges, and then in the Quebec context, we have CEGEPs and the publicly funded private colleges. And so, as we all know, education is a provincial. It's run provincially, not federally. So it leads to a lot of differences between provinces, and that comes out in each of the studies that we do. So I think that is it for me, and I'll turn it over to Olga and Charlene.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nicole. And Nicole gave a beautiful land acknowledgement, but I'll just add that I'm on the unceded territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and particularly the Coquitlam nations where I am at my home today. So I'll kind of pop into the study that we did using the CDLRA data. And so it's been wonderful having somebody who is with CDLRA with us on our research team. And so our kind of rationale for looking at this data and doing a deeper analysis on some of it was that there's obviously been a long history of distance education use, starting from, back when there used to be printed packets to what we're all looking at now and what we're all much more familiar with now. But there has been a major reliance on proxy data to inform some of this decision making pertaining to digital education. And when we say the term digital education, it's obviously a very broad term. And as you can imagine, a lot of the open-ended results we were looking at had a huge variance of terms in what they were talking about, but we're talking about things like blended, online, basically anything in that kind of realm. And then we noticed that there was also a lack of pan-Canadian data on digital learning. So there was, of course, the survey, but there's kind of a lack of looking at the broader picture of what's happening in digital learning in Canada. And if we'll just skip to the next slide, our guiding question, our research question was, how do post-secondary institutions describe faculty training and support for digital education in Canada? So we're looking at essentially how they're reporting their experiences with faculty training and support. And we'll move into talking a little bit about our research team and our methods. So we are a group of 4 researchers. One of us who's not with us today, Dr. George Veltsianis, he's actually our kind of leader as the Canada Research Chair in this topic, but we all come from positionality where we are kind of experienced and experts in technology and education, and we all have experience with higher education teaching, learning, research, and then of course Nicole is employed by the CDLRA and the primary author of the 2019 national report, so that's where she comes to us positionally. Our study, we looked at 36 open-ended questions. So you can see there was a variance in the number of questions per year, obviously to reflect that the field is ever changing. And I will acknowledge that, of course, there was some variance, but they were all in the same strain of digital learning. And they were all quite insightful on the same topic. And then you can see a report here just of the institutions invited, our response rate, just kind of where we're getting our data from. And from there, we looked specifically at the open-ended questions. And if you'll just skip to the next slide, Charlene, this is how we approached analyzing the open-ended questions. So we took all of the open-ended questions that, the answers to open-ended questions that we received, and did kind of a very broad open coding. Of those who have done qualitative research, this is kind of the first step of mass open coding by 2 of the team members. And then we reviewed the survey questions and CDLRA reports for sensitizing concepts. This, of course, sensitizes us to potential lines of inquiry, understanding the way the questions impacted themes. And from there, a number of iterative discussions of the whole group of 4 researchers led to the identification of 8 categories with 84 codes and subcodes. So we were able to kind of group it into 8 more broader categories. And from there, we were able to do a focused and selective coding related to those 8 major themes. And we will get now into some of the themes that Charlene will share with us.
Thanks, Olga. So I'm Charlene VanLeeuwen, and I'm coming to you from Mi'kma'ki in the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people, which is also known as Prince Edward Island. So in terms of some of our findings, the first major theme that we want to talk about is one where the data from all 3 years of the survey revealed, rich information about the broad range of professional development practices and modalities used by higher education institutions. So for example, the 2018 survey specifically asked institutions to share comments about the best ways they provide faculty with training, pedagogical knowledge, while in contrast, the 2019 survey focused on institutions' professional development practices for new and experienced faculty, preparing them to teach online. We also want to sort of provide a bit of a reminder that this data was all collected several months and even years before the pandemic. So it definitely reflects a very different landscape to what we may be encountering now. Overall, we had 101 respondent comments that elaborated on approaches to professional development at their institution. So basically providing more information than just simply stating who was responsible for providing training and professional development. And we found that institutions described an extensive array of practices that they employ to provide faculty professional development, training, and support for digital education. And these include training that can be undertaken independently by faculty members, one-to-one interactions with others, other professionals such as instructional design folks or peers, and also group professional development opportunities. And respondents such as this one acknowledge the need for flexibility in their professional development approaches. So based on comments from 61 respondents, our second theme revealed two important strategies for changing negative stereotypes and promoting positive faculty attitudes around digital education. And these are access to instructional design support and professional development opportunities that allow faculty to learn about high quality outcomes that arise from well-designed digital education opportunities and activities. So really having an opportunity to experience important in helping faculty perhaps change some of their preconceptions around the quality of digital education, and also it helped in terms of building their capacity to provide high quality digital education as well. Our third theme shared a number of challenges and barriers related to faculty professional development, training, and support. So one was around challenges of culture change. Another was work security and unclear expectations. And these challenges were reiterated by 59 different responding institutions. So in terms of some challenges around development of professional development that would complement the culture change needs of their institution, training targeted towards a specific institutional culture was mentioned quite a number of times. Our second challenge around work security concerns emerged, and this was especially important given the number of precarious faculty members such as sessionals that are employed in higher education. The third challenge that emerged in comments was related to institutional expectations, and respondents were articulating the need for clear expectations related to digital education in statements where they're noting, a need for, leadership to be communicating their vision so that they know what this means, and so basically calling for institutions to consider the development of strategies, plans for digital learning. The fourth theme that we outlined in our study showed that we were encountering the entire continuum here. Digital education orientation and onboarding was everything from institutions mandating orientation and onboarding prior to completing or beginning to teach online. Other institutions were offering optional orientation or onboarding that perhaps was being completed concurrently with the beginning of teaching online. And there were other institutions that had no onboarding, no orientation, and faculty were left to figure things out on their own. So some of the implications to these findings are we identified three primary implications. And the first is that, colleges and universities can take steps to ensure they offer the requisite pre-service formation for teaching online, starting with reflection on pedagogical, digital literacy, and technological knowledge and skills needed by faculty members, in particular new faculty members, but also, they need to be thinking about and giving careful consideration to the professional development needs involved in preparing experienced faculty to teach in digital spaces, because their situational needs and expectations may differ from new faculty. The second implication is around cultural changes, and certainly the pandemic has moved things along in this regard. But at the time when we were looking at this data, some examples of multi-level cultural changes that were being discussed in the responses to the surveys included, mandatory pre-service for professional development for faculty, training focused on digital learning for administrators so that they understand what they are asking their faculty members and other instructional staff to be doing, requiring evidence of in-service training as part of tenure and promotion, perhaps looking at, from a more systemic level, implementation of well-articulated strategic plans that identify expectations associated with a range of instructional modalities. So, not just simply the fully online course, but looking at, what are the expectations around blended courses or the use of educational technologies in face-to-face courses. So, I was thinking of Maja's case study that she was just sharing, and some of the technologies that were involved there as well. So, thinking about that. And finally, again, in that systemic thing, looking at appropriate and accessible training for precarious contract academic staff, because, sessionals don't get paid to do the additional training, or the training might not be offered when they're available. So looking at how do you do that? Do you do all self-paced training? Do you offer a variety of options? Do you pay sessional staff or sessional instructors for their time invested in doing this professional development? And certainly emergent needs for faculty professional development. The pandemic, we've seen three big how-to questions emerge. How to rapidly pivot courses from face-to-face to online instruction. And certainly many institutions are looking at that again as they are, started the semester off online and are, considering, well, do we go to pivot back to in person, or do we remain online? So this idea of pivoting courses from one delivery modality to another. A second big how-to question is how to scale digital education options that are effective and engaging for students. and also how to use evidence-informed practices to guide online learning designs, which pay close attention to pedagogy, open educational resources, and also issues of equity. Many of the digital education scholars who, we saw this during the 2020 pivot, shared resources and commentary, within higher education. And this was through, webinars and websites and social media such as Twitter. So, these professional learning networks really came to the fore for faculty members in that first pivot and ongoing as we continue through the pandemic. Finally, there's challenges around unclear institutional strategies or institutional standards for digital education. And this may be fairly straightforward to address through putting together a digital education strategy. So given what we've shared about this study today, there's a number of areas where we think that could be open for future research. Higher education institution leaders need to have a solid understanding of digital education in order to make informed decisions about faculty PD. So questions about digital education training for administrators could be addressed in future research. And as I mentioned, social media and personal learning networks as sites of professional development turned out to be a very rich means and very productive and collaborative means for faculty to access rich resources during the 2020 pivot and the 2020-2021 year of online learning. And so looking at how these networks for digital education scholars might fit into the professional development landscape. And certainly research that very much targets the Canadian context is important, given the fact that we have so many jurisdictions that are involved in the provision of higher education. This paper was part of a larger study, so there are actually two papers that were published. So the second paper is listed here along with the paper that we're highlighting and showcasing today, which is the one that's on the top.
And that I might add, won the award.
Thank you. We'd like to acknowledge some of our partners, and this would include the Canadian Digital Learning Research Association, the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council for some funding, Royal Roads University, which was the base university where we were all employed at the time when we were conducting the research. And at that, I'm going to share our contact information, and we're open to answering any questions.
For time, we'll only be able to take one question, but I'm hoping someone will have one.
I could volunteer, Saul, unless someone else wants to volunteer.
Go ahead, Andre.
Okay, Ms. VanLeeuwen, basically, sorry if I didn't pronounce your name correctly.
That's okay, not a problem.
To tell you frankly, I've been teaching online since 2006. Okay, I actually worked as an instructional designer since that time. I got fascinated by all those medias, all those reports, all those studies that were saying, oh, online learning is not as efficient as in-class learning. And I really questioned that many times. Now, Saul could back me up on that, but any good Concordian and ed tech would probably look at this and say, perhaps a should is cause mental model could probably be the best way to start, looking at all the causes and basically not jumping towards solutions straight away. But the research you did is great, but at the same time, we're still stuck with that mentality, and how can we fix it? And perhaps in my perspective, there may be a lot of groups of performers to look at. And based on that, perhaps that, digging further and having people with, ed tech, good knowledge and innovative solutions could actually bring that pivotal point where we would have more people saying, oh, online learning can actually be super beneficial. And this is pretty much the idea where I kind of stand, saying to myself, like, okay, in days where I used to do it and improve through many years, many people didn't do it. And because of the pandemic, they kind of woke up and said, now we have to do it. And to tell you frankly, if I have to rethink of my first class I gave online, it wasn't the best. So, and I actually had my own insecurities too. So that's where, in a way, I would say, perhaps a certain performance analysis study consultancy could probably be something interesting to look at on a global part. And some institutions do it very differently than other institutions, and that data should be available.
Would you like to respond?
Sure. I mean, we were limited to the data. This was a secondary analysis of data from the CDLRA surveys. So it wasn't a survey where we went out and collected the data. We were constrained in that regard. So certainly some of your comments are right on. Like, I mean, I've been teaching online for a while as well, and I definitely push back against folks that are making the comments that online is substandard. It's like, no, just like face-to-face, there are some folks that do a great job in face-to-face active learning, and others are doing, very much transmissive type of teaching, regardless of the modality. So yeah, Nicole or Olga, do you have anything else that you want to add?
Yeah, I'll just jump in really quick. And I know we're at the top of the hour. I just put in the chat a link to the CDLRA's more recent publications, because we've really been researching this, and not just, we've been partnering with Bayview Analytics in the US to look specifically at that, at some of these issues. We've surveyed with our Bayview partnership, we've surveyed faculty, and even at the shift of the pandemic, the CDLRA did a research study where we've looked at faculty perspectives, and over this past year, we've looked at perspectives of directors and teaching and learning centers, because we're seeing a lot of ambiguity. I would say what we're finding, what our data is showing, is that there certainly seems to be more receptiveness to teaching online, and it is clearly causing people to rethink their teaching practices, whether they're teaching in person or online. One of the key findings we've seen since March of 2020 is that forced shift to online learning has required almost everyone to change some aspect of their teaching practice, but to revisit their pedagogy and to ask themselves, we see people going, oh, actually, this works better than what I was doing in person. And whether they go back to some of their traditional practices, they'll also be using some new practices going forward.
Thank you very much. As I hate to end this conversation, we are at 1 minute past the hour. I want to thank all of our presenters. First of all, Dr. Maja Krzic, second, Drs. VanLeeuwen, Dr. Johnson, and Dr. Belikov. And I want to thank all of you for being here today. I'll be sending up a follow-up email about next month's meeting. I hope you'll all join us for that. And in the meantime, have a great day.
Thank you, Saul, for
Thank you,
Thanks, Saul,
everyone.
and thanks to all.
Thank
the
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to be ending the meeting now, but thank you again. I just really, really appreciate this.